What is up, guys? Show Sports backing up on a video, and in today's video I'm going to discuss 3 players who I believe the Minnesota Timberwolves should look to trade for. Now, the Minnesota Timberwolves are a team who have always been kind of looked at as mediocre, talking about a team who has constantly had that one great star big and has always failed to surround them with pieces. Just looking through their history, guys such as Kevin Garnett and Kevin Love, 2 players who the Timberwolves didn't do anything with, and then they were traded to their new teams and immediately found success with them. And now talking about them now and how they have another star big in Karl-Anthony Towns and have been unsuccessful in providing them with constant great teammates. 2 years ago, they had traded for Jimmy Butler and gave up young assets such as Zach LaVine and Chris Dunn and the number 9 pick, who has turned out to be Lauri Markkanen. And now Lauri Markkanen and Zach LaVine are having success in Chicago, and Jimmy Butler is no longer on the team. With all that being said, though, I do believe that it's still possible for the Minnesota Timberwolves to turn it around this upcoming season and turn themselves into playoff contenders. And with that being said, let's get into the 3 players I believe they should trade for. The first player I want to discuss is Chris Paul. But Chris Paul is a player that I only see the Minnesota Timberwolves trading for if they're extremely desperate. Chris Paul was just recently traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder by the Houston Rockets, and last year he put up 15.6 points per game, 8.2 assists, 4.6 rebounds, or 42% shooting. The season before that, he put 18.6 points, just under 8 assists, and 5.4 rebounds, shooting 46%. Chris Paul would elevate this offense a lot. Just talking about his possibilities. He can give you 15, 16, 17 points and just around 10 assists. Talking about how much that would help the offense, opening up the offense, setting guys up for open shots, and not even to discuss the deadly combination of Chris Paul and Karl-Anthony Towns. Looking at that potential of the pick and roll and the pick and pop, that would be a scary duo. And Chris Paul and Karl-Anthony Towns would more than likely be one of the better point guard to center duos in the league. Talking about a potential trade, I see it would probably have to be Chris Paul for Jeff Teague and Gorgui Dieng. I see this as an obvious salary dump for the Oklahoma City Thunder, because the Oklahoma City Thunder are looking to rebuild. They just traded away Russell Westbrook and Paul George, acquired a plethora of picks, and acquiring back Chris Paul, obviously they don't want Chris Paul. They're going all in with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and it would just make sense. Jeff Teague's contract is up at the end of this year, and Gorgui Dieng has 2 more years left on his deal. So you are getting rid of this enormous, gigantic contract by Chris Paul, and for the Minnesota Timberwolves, you're not giving up a lot. Jeff Teague and Gorgui Dieng are 2 guys who more than likely you won't re-sign. You're getting yourself another great Hall of Fame point guard, potentially. Not potentially, but he is going to make the Hall of Fame. But a Hall of Fame point guard in Chris Paul, and there are some discussions, if Chris Paul can come and still be good. I do believe so. Chris Paul, the last 2 seasons, obviously he was sharing the floor with a ball-dominant guard and James Harden. So that took away from his game. And for the remainder of his contract, I do believe Chris Paul will be a good to serviceable to great NBA point guard. But yeah, that's my first trade. Second player I want to discuss is Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin is, I believe, 31-year-old power forward for the Detroit Pistons. And in my opinion, I believe the Pistons should scrap it and rebuild. They're honestly a mediocre team who hasn't really done much in this past decade. Last year, Blake Griffin had arguably his greatest season of his NBA career, talking about what he was able to do for the Detroit Pistons, putting up just around 25 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, and 5 assists. And he played in 75 games, which is great to see from his past couple of seasons actually, where he wasn't really that healthy. And yeah, a potential trade I see for this would probably be Blake Griffin for Andrew Wiggins, Jarrett Culver, and more than likely a couple of first-round picks. Now, you might say this is giving up a lot for a 31-year-old power forward, but if the Timberwolves want to contend, this is something you're going to have to do. Just looking at the front court of Blake Griffin and Karl-Anthony Towns would be one of the best, if not the best, front court in the NBA right now. Talking about 2 guys who have great playmaking abilities, guys who can score from all over the floor. That is a deadly combination that not many front courts in this league have. Looking at it from the Pistons side, you were getting Andrew Wiggins, a player who you are praying can get back and retain some of that, hype that he's had coming out of Kansas. And then you get Jarrett Culver, a player who you hope can turn into a great scorer / a great 2-way player. And yeah, that's just what I see. And it would just add to your young core of Luke Kennard, Jarrett Culver, Andrew Wiggins, and Sekou Doumbia, who would hopefully be a great one. in a few years, just speeding up that rebuilding process, and which will likely mean the end of Andre Drummond, whose contract is also up at the end of this year. So you have the concern if you want to pay him a max contract or if you want to let him walk. But yeah, and the last player that I believe the Minnesota Timberwolves should trade for is Kyle Lowry. Now, Kyle Lowry is the player who I believe they should probably look most at, and is probably the most realistic option for them. With Kyle Lowry, you get a player who gives you just under 15 points per game and just above 8 assists. And those numbers could fluctuate, go up or go down, because he will be playing with an all-star to superstar big man. He would automatically be the best point guard on your team. A trade I envisioned for Kyle Lowry would be Kyle Lowry for Andrew Wiggins straight up. More than likely for the Timberwolves, you would have to add a protected pick. But, yeah. And you could possibly add a third team, for cap fillers and stuff to make the trade work. But talking about what the trade would be for both sides, for the Minnesota Timberwolves, you're getting everything I said for Chris Paul, but to a lesser extent. And without as high of a risk. So you might say this trade is better than the Chris Paul trade. The pick and roll / pick and pop with Karl-Anthony Towns and Kyle Lowry would be borderline elite, or you could even say it would be elite. Kyle Lowry also adds a veteran presence and give you another point guard on your team, which is a position in which you are lacking. Your only point guard really that's going to get heavy minutes next year is Jeff Teague. Looking at this from the Raptors side, the only way I see the Raptors doing this is if they are a borderline playoff team or out of the playoff hunt around the trade deadline. Mario Ujiri is a GM who is known for being aggressive, and I don't know, trading Kyle Lowry would just be, an aggressive move to me. Looking at, a move to get something in return for him, because I don't think Masai Ujiri will want to give, Kyle Lowry a big contract, especially considering that he's 33, I believe, now. And he's going to want an extension at the end of this year, or you let him walk. So this is just a way for you to get something. This would also give the Raptors Andrew Wiggins, bringing him back to where he was born in Canada. And you are hoping that he can turn his career around and provide you with great scoring. Talking about a potential team for the future, Pascal Siakam and Andrew Wiggins is what you hope can be a good dynamic duo and two players that you can hopefully build your team around. Not to mention the other young guys you have on your team, such as Fred VanVleet and OG Anunoby. But yeah, that's just how I see it. Those three players, as I stated in the video, with Chris Paul and Kyle Lowry, the pick and roll, pick and pop with Karl-Anthony Towns would be so amazing. Chris Paul, obviously, I have him playing with Andrew Wiggins, and that could possibly stunt his growth, considering that Andrew Wiggins needs the ball in his hands to be successful. But I don't know. At this point in time, you're holding Andrew Wiggins on a tight leash. He's been giving everything from the jump. Number 1 overall pick, has never had to fight for minutes. Given a contract extension, you could say too early. I am optimistic on Andrew Wiggins and hoping that he can come in and be a great player, but ultimately we'll see. But that's gonna do it for this video, guys. I hope you guys did enjoy. Please like and sub and share with your friends. But it's So Sports, and I'm out. Peace.